One of Canada's most notorious killers is hoping for a taste of freedom. Paul Bernardo has filed an application for day parole in Toronto. The lawyer who represents the families of the two teen girls Bernardo murdered also confirms Bernardo has had medical appointments outside of prison grounds and that he's been escorted to those appointments. Bernardo was convicted in 1995 for the rape and murder of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffy. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. He was also declared a dangerous offender. And for more on this, I'm joined now by Steve Niles. So what would it take for Bernardo to actually get this?
There is a process that is someone like Paul Bernardo or anyone else who's convicted of first-degree murder and declared a dangerous offender can go through. But just to back up for a second, to reiterate something that Paul said, in jail since 1995 for the convicted in the deaths of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffy, serving a life sentence without parole for 25 years. But he was also convicted of raping at least 14 women, and he's suspected of doing so possibly several more victims. So when he was convicted of that, given dangerous offender status. Now that means after 25 years, he's not automatically eligible for parole. Dangerous offender status in Canada, it's the most severe designation someone can be given under Canadian law, and it means he will be held indefinitely. So what he's seeking, this process that he wishes to undertake, removal from the dangerous offenders list, which would then allow him to seek parole after that 25-year period. These are his rights as a Canadian citizen. Anyone who is convicted of these crimes has a right to at least apply for this. Whether or not he's successful, though, that remains up to the parole board. He is now 50 years old, asking for permission, as you say, to be allowed during out of the day for day parole would be the next step for that, meaning that they are allowed to leave prison, but they just must return at night. He's a long way from that right now, and he's currently serving his sentence, Paul, at Millhaven Institution in Eastern Ontario.
You know, I was in the trial. I sat through it, and I sat through the dangerous offender hearing, and you know, the families of the victims, it was they were gutted, you know, and you could see it every day of the trial. And in his dangerous offender hearing, the Scarborough rape victims were there, and they were as if they had been eviscerated. And it's like it was 20 years ago. Yeah. 20 years ago today, I was in court watching him with my own eyes, you know, and you never forget that stuff. And I mean, has there been reaction from the families today?
It's the type of, this was a trial that captivated not just attention in this country, in the city of Toronto, across Canada, and throughout the world as well, in Europe and the United States. Many people paying attention to this. Many people remember scenes just like that from 20 years ago. So not surprisingly, there has been a lot of reaction. We got some from an official capacity today from Ottawa. Julian Fantino, the Associate Minister of National Defence, who also used to be the police chief in Toronto in the years after Bernardo was convicted, but he would certainly have been aware of this. He released a statement as well, and he said, "Our government believes that all dangerous criminals should remain behind bars where they belong. This individual committed evil and horrific crimes for which he should be held fully accountable, not permitted any freedom." Now, we are hearing about this application for Bernardo to seek day parole and removal from dangerous offender status because a letter as part of the process has been sent to the victims and their families. We spoke to the lawyer for the French and Mahaffy families earlier today. Have a listen.
I've told them to take all the time they need. There's no rush, and they're certainly not going to be rushed by the likes of Paul Bernardo. For the families, you know, it's gut-wrenching. It's very emotional, very, very difficult time for them. They just need time to digest this, to absorb it, to decompress a little bit.
So these letters have been going out, Paul, to the families of the French and Mahaffy families got them. Many of the victims, when he was committing sex assaults in Scarborough, they have also gotten these letters, and they have until July 14th, if they choose to submit a victim impact statement.
And none of them, obviously, will ever forget what happened, but you kind of think they must have thought they'd never have to go through this kind of thing again.
Yeah.
It's just... Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
Joining us for more on this now, Eric Guittardi, criminal defense lawyer. You know, I think a lot of people are thinking, man, he was named a dangerous offender, and that's to the end of your biological life that you're behind bars. So how can a dangerous offender be applying for day parole? How does that work?
Well, it's you know, it's a very technical area. You know, it's a situation where really it's probably going to be much ado about nothing. It's because, for a serial murder like this, there really is absolutely no possibility that he's going to be successful in this application to get parole. You might as well apply to be an astronaut for all we care, because really there's absolutely no chance that he's going to get parole. It's important that people understand that just because there's the possibility that someone might be able to apply for parole doesn't mean they're going to get it. And certainly in a situation like this, with the nature of the offenses, the number of offenses, there's really no possibility of parole in this case.
Why is it even, allowed then that he can apply for it? I mean, I sat through the trial and I sat through his dangerous offender hearing, and I saw the pain that all of this stuff caused everybody that he came in contact with, and I'm thinking, not a chance, right? As you note. So why is it even allowed that this step be taken by him?
Well, it's almost a historical artifact at this point. When you're talking about people who are sentenced to the worst crimes, murders, multiple murders, back in the day, there was a possibility of the death penalty. And when that was taken off the books, one of the counter arguments was, we've got to give them some kind of hope at the end of the tunnel so they'll behave themselves while they're in there for the safety of the guards and other inmates and those kinds of things. And so, this very far off hope that they could one day apply after a long period of time for parole was left in there. But just because they can apply doesn't mean that they're going to get it. And again, life really does mean life when it's 25 years, before you can even apply. And it's important for people to understand that.
How often do, let's set Bernardo aside, other killers who are sentenced to life, do they win day parole or parole ever?
Well, it's actually, it's one of the very interesting statistics when you look at parolees. People are convicted of a single murder. It's usually someone who's been very close to them, and parolees who are successful, and from time to time they are successful after they've served 25 years or longer. They're the safest parolees. Their risk of recidivism is actually the lowest of all offenders. So in terms of those folks that are successful, and it's not a huge number, it's a very low number, they're the safest parolees that we have in our system. In a situation like Bernardo's, where you're talking about a serial multiple murderer, there's really no chance. And so people, they don't need to get too inflamed about this, that there's a realistic possibility of this, and get too upset about it, because there really is no chance for this particular offender.
Just very quickly, have you ever heard of a dangerous offender being granted parole? A dangerous offender?
No, I haven't. That would be extremely rare, because you're supposed to be in there until you expire.
He is, and likely will be.
Likely will be.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Paul.